All right, class, welcome back to Art 385, week number 3, as we dive into chapter number 3. I think you'll find this chapter interesting, at least. As I said in my introduction there are some theories here that we need to work through. I really want you to try to read through them, to understand them, but to also not get bogged down in them. This week's film is The Marquise of O, and as you hopefully read on my announcement for week number 1, but also I know a couple of you had looked at Netflix and couldn't find this film. It's not available anywhere. I've looked everywhere. I've done multiple internet searches, looking through YouTube and other video companies out there that are online. It is not on Netflix. If you go to Amazon, you might be able to find a copy somewhere between $35 to $75. I don't think any of us want to do that for a film that is in German, because I'm assuming most of us don't speak German. But anyways, The Marquise of O. We are going to watch a clip of it. I was able to find a clip. I also was able to find the movie trailer. And so you'll be able to watch that and do some of the assignment based on that as well. A little bit of a background on the film, as you'll get some of this from your reading of Chapter 3. But Eric Rohmer is the director. He is a French director who is working with an Italian, or is with a setting in Italy, and with an all-German cast speaking German language. So quite the European affair. It's based on Hendrik von Kleist's novella from, I believe, 1799, late 18th century, early 19th century. And it was really a novella, basically. It wasn't a full-length novel, but it was a short kind of story. Has some operic sort of qualities to it, and as you'll read through, it's somewhat a scandalous story here involving a woman who's pregnant. The beginning of the novel actually opens with a woman announcing to the public, "I am pregnant, and if the father will come forward, I will gladly marry the father of my baby," which means she doesn't know how she got pregnant. She doesn't know why she's pregnant. And there are some serious issues here going on, and particularly because she is a well-known daughter of a well-known family in that community there. It turns out, and as we have already dealt with some darker or more sensuous subject matters, even in Red Desert, it turns out that she had, there was a count who was with her in the biblical sense while she was kind of in a delusional state. You could even say he raped her. It wasn't violent in that sense, but he definitely took advantage of her without her knowledge, and she became pregnant. And so the struggle of the story is kind of back and forth. I believe Dalvece actually refers to him as kind of both an angel and a demon figure, that he has this kind of good and bad qualities to him, and the novella kind of deals with that. Okay, well that's not like many of the romantic comedies that we're used to watching, are they? But anyways, the movie itself, Rohmer's desire and goal is to try to capture life as it was in the late 18th century there. During this era, the German and French neoclassical and romantic movements were in high. It's late at night. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but anyways, they were very popular art forms at that time. Neoclassicalism and Romanticism. It also was the era of sentimentalism, so what Rohmer decided to do was, let's try to look at as much of the art from this era and use it as a template, as a way of perhaps going back in time and seeing how these people live what they looked like. And so as you will see, particularly in even this 4-minute clip, there is a scene there that is very much emulated by a famous painting from its day. Romer was conscious in his recreation of these scenes from popular paintings. And he does this throughout the film. It's unfortunate that we're not able to see the entire movie for this very sake, because it happens often. So in some ways, his goal was to cinematize the literature. The novella works really well for this. That it's not a full-length novel. He didn't have to cut anything. He was able to actually, for the most part, present the dialogue and the scenes exactly as they were in the novel. And so with taking classic classic paintings from the era and marrying them to the literature, the words from the actual novella, it was his attempt to try to, if you will, even as Dalvechi said, to be an architect. Not so much a director, but an architect in assembling and arranging and organizing all of, if you will, staging even, all the various spaces and things that need to kind of come together so that we can understand this world better. This term is interesting to me. The director as an architect, someone who is an organizer, who is dealing with the spaces, and not so much necessarily a painter, but an architect. So it's an interesting concept. It's one that I think I'm going to think about and ponder, and I think you should too. Sometimes this language, as I said, can go over our head, but we need to ask ourselves, what does she mean by this? I think I'm leaning towards that what she is trying to say is that the director is gifted in being able to bring this 18th century novella to life. As much as he can, he's able to actually recreate, if you will, and to maybe breathe life into this novella so that the reader isn't just reading it and picturing images in their head, but he's actually guided by this director as he visually sees maybe even a broader perspective of what this might have looked like had it taken place in the late 18th century there. There's a little bit of what I'm thinking as I read through this, as we think through some of these theories. One thing I want to point out as a technique, and I think it'll be worthwhile to look at this. If you have your book, you can look at the bottom of page 82, and there is the last full sentence on the bottom of this page uses a term called mise-en-scene, or mise-en-scene. If you speak French, you probably can say it a lot better than I am, but most people here in the United States with mise-en-scene, and people know what you're talking about. She talks about the mise-en-scene. She talks about this idea of an architect assembling, if you will, a picture, or a staging, if you will, the life or the words that are trying to be portrayed on screen. Now, this term mise-en-scene, it's French, once again, and as you will see, if you study any amount of film, you will know that the French have given a lot of thought to cinema. They have contributed a lot to the way we think about films and how we study them, how we watch them. But literally the term means putting into the scene, what is in the scene, what we see in the scene. And it is a term that sometimes is maybe a little challenging to define. I think if you look across multiple sources, you'll see that it boils down to really kind of 4 main areas, and I'll state these now and I'll elaborate on them in a little bit here. But the setting, costumes and makeup, lighting, and then obviously the movement and performance of the actor. Sometimes people might say the staging of the performance there. But those are kind of the 4 areas of mise-en-scene, and I'll dive into those in a moment. When we think about cinema, and when we think about movies that we watch, there are kind of, I'll break down for you 4 kind of components, 4 main areas that make up a movie. We have, as I just said, the mise-en-scene. We also have cinematography, editing, and sound. And what I'm talking about is what we experience when we're watching a movie. You could throw in the screenplay in there, perhaps as maybe the bedrock component to it. But really, when we're watching a film, and when we're with all 5 of our senses, well, unless you have smell-o-vision, I guess with all maybe 3.5 senses, depending how much bass you have turned up for your touch. But when we're watching it in a sense, gosh, it's late. My words are not coming the way I like them. But I'm sorry. But as we're watching a movie, as we're taking it in, we're looking at the mise-en-scene, as we'll look at in a moment. The cinematography, really kind of how the shot is established and set up and framed and composed. The editing, the way it's put together, assembled. And then sound is another big component there. Now, down the road, I hope to maybe look at those other 3 components, cinematography, editing, and sound. But for the sake of this class, visual art, the mise-en-scene is going to come up a lot. She might not use the term that often, but a lot of times she is going to talk about these ideas. What I think this director, Romer, what I think other directors have strived to do is to, particularly in the last 2, Red Desert and now the Marquise of O, is capture a sense of realism, trying to capture the world as it is or as it was. Other directors might go another route. I wonder about Manili in the sense of, even I think Valdecce refers to that he was more or less trying to create a world, Parisland, a Disneyland. So it's not necessarily rooted on realism as it is rooted on some impressionism, rooted upon even just ideas that we have in our head about Paris. And so he uses mise-en-scene, but it's not necessarily to create realism, but perhaps to create another kind of maybe even fantasy world in that regard. Mise-en-scene is used to communicate to us without words, without narration, a lot. It communicates time, it communicates location, it communicates feeling, it communicates what we even should be thinking at times. And a lot of this is done very much on the subliminal level. But the goal of mise-en-scene, the director uses mise-en-scene to create either a realistic or a non-realistic setting. You might think, why would a director want a non-realistic setting? Well, think about this. Sometimes it's for a comedic effect. There's certain comedies that we watch that have absurd backgrounds or absurd things happening to them. They make us laugh. They look different. They're bizarre. Sometimes it's terror. I mean, come on. Freddy and Jason would not be that scary if it weren't for the dark lighting and the shadows and the forest that the young couple's out kissing in, and then all of a sudden the terror's coming. So a terror can be established it's in a non-realistic sort of way, or maybe even understating beauty, maybe making things a little bit more muted, a little bit less interesting, for the sake of creating kind of a non-realistic setting for the movie. Okay, the 4 elements, though, of mise-en-scene, as I stated before: setting, costume, makeup, lighting, and staging, perhaps the movement and performance. Setting, so important. The location, where are we? What are we watching? Why do we know that we're there? In previous classes, I've shown a clip from The Hurt Locker, Best Picture, 2009. And as we look at this setting, right off, it's the very first scene from the movie. We instantly are told several things. We're not in America. It's kind of a desert locale. There are some rundown shops around with foreign writing on the wall. The way the kind of a desert dirt scene. There's a war, blown up kind of cars around, bullet holes on the wall. So instantly the setting tells us we're in a war zone here. And it looks very deserty. It looks Arab. So perhaps we're in Iraq. So you don't even have to tell us, hey, hi, I'm an actor. I'm in Iraq and I'm in a war zone. We don't need that to be communicated to us. The setting communicates that to us. And a director, working with his art director and a lot of their set designers, will take a lot of time to make sure that the location, that the background, that if they need to build a set, that it communicates something. If they're on location, that it's the right location. Years ago, I worked in the production office as an intern for The Patriot, Mel Gibson movie. Never got to meet him. Never went on location. Didn't even get to go to the premiere. But I was a student intern in the office as they were location scouting and casting, and got to see a lot of that aspect to it. The director, along with his team, were flying all over the place. They were looking at various locations because they wanted to make sure that that movie had an authentic feel to it. At one point, they were looking up in Canada and even in parts of Eastern Europe to see if perhaps they could do it on the cheap. But finally, thankfully, they settled in, I think it was North or South Carolina there, to have an authentic revolutionary era American feel to it. But setting is very important, and a director will take the time to make sure that that is right. Costume and makeup as kind of a one unit there. So important. These are things that we don't often think about. But let's go back to that scene from The Hurt Locker. In fact, I will, if it's still available, I'll put that scene up there just so you can refer to it if you haven't seen it. But here we are, opening scene. Nothing's been told to us, and we see two soldiers. How do we know they're soldiers? Well, they're in uniform. They've got guns. They've got American flags on their arms, and they are in kind of a situation where they look like they're a little concerned, but not overly concerned. They're the bomb, and they're going to defuse it. And so the costumes that they have on work great. I accept that they are soldiers and that they are actually there in Iraq defusing bombs. If the costumes had looked like cheap little Navy outfits from a bad 1942 musical, I would have gone, who are these guys? I don't know what they're doing. Now that's one element of costumes. If we go back to An American in Paris, we think about during the ballet sequences. We think about kind of the street scenes. There are various aspects of costumes that were used in that film that actually helped create, it helped communicate we are in Paris, or we are dealing with a certain time period. There's another clip I'm going to put up for you from the Hudsucker Proxy to take a look at. I want you to guess what era is that movie from, and why do you think it's from that era? And a lot of this is going to be based on the costume. Makeup, hairstyle, it goes hand in hand. All those elements work together to make a character and to kind of set the stage for who they are and what they're doing and why they're doing it. It communicates a lot to us. All right, two more quickly. The lighting is so important. One of you wrote about this in your discussion or your journal, I believe it was a journal, about lighting and how you realize, particularly in American in Paris, how important lighting is. Lighting is phenomenally important, if that's even the right way to say it, as I say this at 12 o'clock at night. Lighting is amazing. Any of you ever seen perhaps a film noir movie? Sunset Boulevard, Double Indemnity. Even Citizen Kane has noir elements to it, where shadows, Casablanca does this actually fairly well too, where shadows communicate a lot, where there's drop shadows, where there's casted shadows, where people are silhouetted. The lighting communicates to the audience a lot of what's going on there. It's important to consider that a director and his lighting crew will take a long time to actually set up lights. They aren't just dealing with natural sunlighting for most cases. They are making sure that lights are actually controlled. If you see somebody who is in kind of an interesting lighting, maybe it looks poor to you, that's normally not accidental. There is some sort of thought behind it. It's communicating something to the audience. Now, on the flip side, as much as we like to control lighting, whether it's somebody completely lit, like I've tried to do, I put some lamps around here, so I'm lit, I'm not like blending into my background. But some of these auteurs, some of these theorists actually considered working with just natural ambient lighting, and that was part of the challenge. Let's capture lighting as it is. But even if you watch certain films, like let's say Breathless by Jean-Luc Godard, we're going to look at one of his films here in the next couple weeks. Not Breathless, but Breathless is shot almost exclusively on location with only ambient lighting or as much natural lighting as possible. And they do a good job of making sure that everyone is exposed, but then there are times when they allow it to be grainy or to be shadowed for effect, to communicate something to us. And then finally, moving into our latter stage, when we think of mise-en-scene, we think about setting, costume and makeup, lighting, and then finally, the overall performance, the movement and the performance of the actor. How they are placed on a screen is so important. Where they are, how they move, how their performance comes across is highly important. If we think about Romer's film here, Marquise of O, he really was striving that to make sure that his actors were realistic and that they were coming across as real actors. This is a challenge because this movie was made in 1975, and when we watch some of these sequences here, we might not think it's that realistic. Realism is somewhat relative. I'm not a relativist when it comes to morality, but when it comes to what we accept as realistic acting or even a realistic movie, that changes with time. You can look at a movie from the 1930s. Go back and look at some of the people who won Best Actor, Best Actress in the 1930s, and you might go, well, I don't know. They were a little melodramatic. They were a little understated or overstated. Their performance didn't really move me. Well, for its time, it worked. If you go back even to the mid-50s and look at Marlon Brando or James Dean, I mean, these guys were the actors of their day. Look at On the Waterfront with Marlon Brando. Phenomenal acting for its time, but there are times when it seems a little too, I could have been a contender, a little overstated perhaps. As the art of acting has evolved, as the art of cinema has evolved, realistic performances have changed. So we have to be careful that we judge a film based on its era and what it was for its time. But nonetheless, performance is important. If an actor just blows it, if they forget to think about what they're doing, or if they're not in the moment, the audience is going to catch that. If a director is astute to working with their actors, that could cause some problems there. And like I said, staging is so important. Where they move around, all of these things together work as mise-en-scene. It works as we pull them all together. They work as a unit on screen to communicate to the audience things that are not said in word, but are communicated truly. And I think even as we read this chapter here, that's what Dalveche, that's what Astruc, that's what Romer, that's what some of these people were really trying to work with. How can we communicate without being so blatant about it, but just really presenting life, presenting the scene. Obviously, we're recreating it, but instead of just being a staged play, how can maybe as a director, as an architect, can we assemble, can we stage, can we arrange what we're watching on screen in a way that communicates what is going on in the actor's mind or the character's mind, or what is going on in the director or the author's mind as they are presenting this for the audience to. Sorry, my cat hopped up there. For them to enjoy or to understand. So, anyways, with that, I hope that's somewhat understandable as I wrap up here almost at 12:30 at night. If you have any questions, please email me. I'm going to put a link up as well that kind of goes over some of the basics of Mise-en-scene. Also has a few clips for you to look at as well. But I hope you're enjoying the class. I know I am. I'm watching the Red Desert. I'd never seen before, I have to be honest. And the more I think about it, it was visually stunning. I know the subject matter was a little difficult to deal with at a couple of different times. But in general, it was a visually very interesting movie. And I do hope that as we look at these couple clips and as you go to watch a movie on your own to see some of these elements in it that you enjoy this week. If you have any questions, please email me, contact me, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you very much. Good night.